Well, Buffalo, of course, you knew I'd be on tonight. Maybe you didn't quite know the reasons why I would be on. I didn't expect to be on for the reasons that I am on tonight. But hey, better to have a show with something to talk about, something big to talk about, than to just not have much to talk about, right? And we're in the dog days of the off season right here in Buffalo. Each and every day, we're checking updates. We're checking to see what the situation is with our Buffalo Bills, the day to day activity within the organization. And of course, today was a big day for the Buffalo Bills. They dominated the national headlines for reasons that we did not come to expect, in the sense that Buffalo Bills Pro Bowl wide receiver Stefon Diggs missed mandatory minicamp today. Throughout the day, while I had the necessary time to dedicate to seeing some of the reactions around the media cycle, around the social media cycle within Bills Mafia, getting the lowdown on how people are feeling about this, I'm perplexed for a wide variety of reasons. I'm perplexed by the immediate jump to conclusions reactions that is by a lot of people right now, whether it's the national media or even the Bills Mafia. And I want to break this down for you because on this show, as I've come to be known to do over the course of my time on my podcast, is breaking things down with the legitimate, utmost common sense that I have in my ability to, rather than guess a story that isn't there, is to provide my outlook on a story that is a real story, breaking it down in a real form and fashion as to why Stefon Diggs missed mandatory minicamp today and why there is not much reason at all for Buffalo Bills fans to be worried. Now, today we had heard the news that Stefon Diggs was not an active participant in mandatory minicamp from Bills head coach Sean McDermott. The media, though, that was there and present knew that number 14 was not there. And of course, when number 14 is not out on the field, we know it. We know it very well. We know it during games. We know it during practices. We know it because Stefon Diggs is just that damn good. And when he's not out there, it's easy to know it, right? Because he's just that good. And he's just that magnetic of a player on and off the field that when he's not out there, he's sorely missed. So the media goes into this press conference already knowing that this is the case. And they ask Sean McDermott, we have to start with this, folks, first and foremost. They ask Sean McDermott, Sean, obviously Stefon Diggs, not an active participant today. Elaborate on that. And Sean McDermott, the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, stated that everybody was there but Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs was the only person that was not at mandatory minicamp. And Sean McDermott, quote, said that he was very concerned about it. And with that quote, you have every bored vulture journalist willing to spin that and jump to conclusions as to just what does that mean? What does it mean that the coach of the Buffalo Bills is concerned that his player is not there? Is he concerned in regards to Stefon Diggs and maybe Diggs not showing the personality trait that he needs to in what, year 5 or 4 with the Bills? Coming off of what is supposed to be yet another run at it, another crack at it, another stab at finally another kick at kicking the door down heading into this season of trying to make it to the Super Bowl, and your best receiver, arguably your best offensive playmaker outside of your quarterback is not there. And Sean McDermott says he's very concerned, which the media jumped on that. They're so bored at this point in the season, in the quote-unquote off season, that they jumped on that as they should, in a sense. That's their job, is to spin a story, to create a story, even when there is one that might not be there. And the question is there a story here? To me, there is a story. But to me, I always seem to find that ability. I'm not saying it to toot my own horn. I know there's a lot of other people like this as well. to talk about what the real story is. What's the real story? It's not the fact that Stefon Diggs missed mandatory mini camp in the first practice that was mandatory this offseason. Not that. It's the fact that when asked about it, Sean McDermott said that he was very concerned. I want to know why Sean McDermott was very concerned. Was he only concerned due to the fact that simply Stefon Diggs was not there, or was there more to this? So I did some digging, necessary digging, to find out what it was that made Stefon Diggs not be available at this practice. And moments into doing some digging, I was already told by Stefon Diggs' agent with a simple tweet that was obviously posted by the man, the myth, the legend, Adam Schefter, that Stefon Diggs' agent believes that Stefon Diggs will be there the rest of this process and will be at every single mandatory minicamp practice. In the words of Allen Iverson, we're talking about practice isn't important 100%. Do we want to know that everybody's there, including Stefon Diggs as Bills Mafia members? 100%. But the reason that he was not there is something that we will only be allowed to speculate. We'll never know the exact reason why Stefon Diggs missed mandatory minicamp practice. And 3 months from now, we won't give a rat's you-know-what as to why he missed a mandatory first minicamp practice on June 13th. We'll only care, is Stefon Diggs ready to go week 1 in Buffalo Bills red, white, and blue against the New York Jets? That's my question. That's my question. People can try to break this down any which way they want. They can try to make a story out of nothing. And they can try to spin it in a way that says, well, man, Stefon Diggs, we're better off without him. No, we're not. That's just silly. That's a really dumb take, that we're better off without him. That doesn't make any sense. He's better off on this team than on any other team. Not many people have said that, but I've seen, well, this guy's a diva. He needs to show up for practice. We don't even know if any reason at all Stefon Diggs is not showing up to minicamp practice in relation to his frustrations with the team. We don't know that. We know that he was frustrated at the end of the year last year, and because of that, people are now jumping to conclusions that he's frustrated. He doesn't want to be here. He doesn't want to play with Josh Allen anymore. I truthfully, highly doubt that that is the case. The case could be a bunch of different things. And according to people that I've talked to, they've said that it was a personal matter that was non-football related as to why he missed that first practice. And when people jump to these conclusions, and let's just say it turns out he had a family matter or he had something personal to him that made him miss that practice. He was there, then he wasn't there. He was there working out, then he wasn't there. Or was showing that he was working out, but he wasn't there. However you want to look at it, right? There was a reason he wasn't there. And I highly, highly doubt that when his next interview happens, he will state that it has anything to do with Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, or Ken Dorsey. And yet, just to get clicks, just to get likes, just to get misinformed discussion created, and just for us to waste our own time speculating on X, Y, and Z that does not exist and only wastes time and only diverts everyone's attention from what we should be talking about. And that is the fact that Sean McDermott stated that he was very concerned. To me, the concern is not whether or not Stefon Diggs was there. The concern is not whether or not Stefon Diggs, or as to why he wasn't there. The concern is why Sean McDermott said he was concerned about it without knowing the actual reason. How did Sean McDermott, who is the head coach of this team, who is supposed to have his finger on the pulse of every single player in that locker room, how did he not know why he was there? Or not there, I should say. That's the question. That's the question that we should be asking ourselves. In that moment, when the media asked Sean McDermott why Stefon Diggs wasn't there, or Diggs isn't there. What's the lowdown? He says he's very concerned. You gotta know. You gotta know. And maybe he didn't know, and maybe he was shocked just as much as anybody. But that to me is concerning. That to me is something that I'm concerned about in terms of future disconnects within the franchise potentially. But is that something that I'm going to blow out of proportion and say every week on this show throughout the rest of the season that this team does not have the right coach coaching it? I'm not. I'll only say those things when it comes down to the down and distance, clock management, situational play calling situations that I've seen come up with Brian Dable, Ken Dorsey, as well as Sean McDermott. And now this season, more than any other in Buffalo Bills history with Sean McDermott and the McDermott era, we'll be asking ourselves those questions as McDermott is now the defensive coordinator, the defensive play caller for this team. That's football. That's X's and O's. Breaking down the real news is the fact that there is a player out there by the name of Stefon Diggs that wants to win and that can't wrap his head around in any form or fashion why this team has been unable to do that. But the best thing that Stefon Diggs could do for himself, as well as the team, but as his own man, the best thing that he could do is show up, control what he can control, do what he needs to do. Football is not a one-man sport. Stefon Diggs could be the best receiver in the league on any given Sunday, and it might not matter because football is not crafted that way in the form of fashion that is, let's just say, the NBA, where one player can dominate on a team, can carry a team. Does not happen in the National Football League. It just doesn't. You have to have contributing factors outside of that one most valuable player-esque talent at any position that lead to the positive results that you want. And Stefon Diggs is one of those players that I think he wants to win so badly on this team that maybe, just maybe, if I were to put my speculation hat on, maybe, just maybe, he wanted to just take a moment before he started when everyone else did. I've been there. I've been there with certain things, with certain things like that. You want to take a step back for a minute, reflect just a little bit more before you dive into something. But I highly doubt that this will be a story that we'll be talking about in the next 3 months. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, then that means that there is a disconnect between Sean McDermott and the players. And if that is the case, that's the story. That's the story that prohibits the Buffalo Bills in their greatest era since Jim Kelly from winning the Super Bowl, since the K-Gun era. This is the best Bills era that we've lived in the last 30 plus years. And the only way that it doesn't accomplish what has been set out to be accomplished is due to the chinks in the armor that we've already seen. And it all comes down to being the fact that football is a coach's game. It is a X's and O's game. The teams that make it, the teams that survive, is largely due to the fact that they are coached to make it. They are coached to survive and last. They're not coached to not lose a game. They're coached to win a game. Big, big difference. And that's the switch that has to be flipped heading into 2023 and 2024 for the Buffalo Bills. And I'll tell you this, this is a large distraction that is silly, that is stupid, that nobody will care about in 3 months. It's only going to be fodder conversation for the next couple days, if that. And this will die down faster than any story we'll hear all offseason long. I feel very confident in that. And breaking it down, the real news to me is that you do have reason to believe that maybe Sean McDermott does not have the best gauge on his players. At the very least, the best gauge that he should have on his players. And to me, that is a massive, massive story for a guy that has had all the success that he's had in Buffalo. I think you're at a point where this is either going to go way up in the right direction or it could go way down in the wrong direction, and it would largely rest on his shoulders. I've talked about it, I've hinted at it, I've spoken about it briefly on the pod before, but this is how I really feel in terms of just make or break, put up or shut up, now or never. The moment is here, the moment is now. This has to be done. Winning a Super Bowl is all that matters. Nothing else matters. Getting it done in the form and fashion that they need to get it done. And let's be honest, I really feel today, as I sit here right now, moving forward from this story that is the Stefon Diggs situation, I can kick back, look back at this offseason, and say to myself, this is the best offseason that Brandon Beane has ever had, including one last year where he brought in Von Miller. That was a big deal, obviously. That was a big signing, a lot of money, perennial All-Pro, possibly a future Hall of Famer. I think I could throw that out there. That's not a bold take by me. I think that's a pretty accurate assessment based upon the career that Von has had. But going into an offseason when all the chips are down in terms of losing another divisional round game against Cincinnati, an effort that was a lack thereof, and then going into the offseason with all these cap problems and making all these additions that they've made, re-signing players that you never thought would re-sign, adding difference makers like Dalton Kincaid, Osiris Torrance. I could go on and on. Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, wide receivers. Out are Cole Beasley and John Brown. In are those guys, and I think they have a lot to offer. Sherfield I liked with Miami. A lot of Miami Dolphins fans that I know liked him as well. Deontay Hardy was largely seen as the best speed threat free agent wideout that was available. Prime wide receiver, young wide receiver in his prime, in the thick of it. And defensively, they've made moves as recent as a week ago that I talked about last week with Leonard Floyd and Cameron Dantzler. And those are moves that maybe Dantzler doesn't make the team. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I think he can. But Leonard Floyd is a Pro Bowl caliber pass rusher that they signed for $2 million. And I thought their draft was magnificent. It allowed them to leave the draft with the same amount of picks that they came in with, take players that could fill certain positions, build depth, and then add picks in the next year's draft. I really believe in my heart of hearts that this could be Brandon Beane's best offseason, and yet we're talking about practice. We're talking about mini camp, not training camp. If Stefon Diggs misses training camp, then that's a problem. But if he misses mini camp, one day of it, I'm not going to throw my hands up in the air and say that the sky is falling. We're that bored in the month of June that we have to do that. I'm not. I know who's on this team. I know what this team is capable of. They went 13-3 last year with a grocery laundry list of things that worked against them, and yet they still went 13-3. They lost 3 games by 8 points combined in the regular season. And I watched them all. And those 3 losses were not losses. They were playing down to the level of the team that they were playing. Anytime you do that, you're going to lose. So realistically, this is a team that if they showed up each and every week, they could have won every single game last year. You could say that about a lot of teams. You could. But a lot of teams don't only lose 3 games in a season. A lot of teams lose 10. You can't say that for all 10. You can say that for about 5 out of 10. But when a team goes 13-3 or whatever, they lost 3 games, right? Team goes 3 losses into a season. But the tail end of it, you look at those losses, Minnesota, the Jets, Miami, 2 of them in their own division. And one was by 2 points. The other was by a point. The other was by, X amount of points, and combined total of 8, right? I mean, what more is there to say in regards to that? You move forward. We know what happened to the team with DeMar Hamlin and things like that. But I think a lot of people right now, although it's June 23rd, or pardon me, June 13th, 2023, although it's June 13th, 2023, we're still living in the damn past. We have to move on. We must move on as a fan base, as a city, as a community, as an organization. We have to move on, including all the bad things that uplifted the country, the Damar Hamlin situation, people rallying around Kim Pagula. I hope we don't move on from that. I really wish her nothing but the best and hope that she's okay in the future, day by day recovery. Of course, praying for her. And obviously hoping that Damar Hamlin can return to full health and continue to embark on his NFL career as he's earned the right to. Prior to this injury, he was having a hell of a career and making his mark on the defense. I hope he can continue to have a career, but we have to move on from last season. It's over. It's done. It's finished. Got to look to this year because I know the schedule. Talking about that as well, it's one of the toughest schedules that the Bills have had in recent memory. There's a stretch of teams in a row that were either in the championship game or in the Super Bowl, winning the Super Bowl last year. The Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles going head-to-head last Super Bowl, and the Bills playing back-to-back with a bye week in between, but still 2 games, 2 opponents in a row. This is all just a massive distraction of epic proportions that anyone that puts their reputation on the line, put it on the line, and continue to berate and badger this story and beat it to death like a Cherokee drum. That's up to you. That's what you want to do. I will take the high road and say when Stefon Diggs shows up in minicamp, none of this will matter. It'll all be over. And you guys wasted a ton of time today talking about this. And frankly, I'm a little disappointed. Because let's just say Stefon Diggs does have a legit reason as to why he's not showing up. Let's take the approach of, wait a minute, this guy is known as one of the greatest competitors in this game today. Anyone that's played with him has said this, whether it's at Maryland, Minnesota, Buffalo. This guy knows his talent. He knows that he can help the team win. He wants the ball in his hands because he knows that when it's in his hands, he can make things happen with it that most guys can't, that most guys could only dream of doing in the NFL. No less, let alone the guys like me eating Lay's potato chips and bison dip watching the game, right? So the reason I throw this out there is due to the fact that it's like we're forgetting who this guy is and what this guy means to this team. Whatever you have to do, if you have to make it right, you make it right. You fix it. At one point, 35 years ago, this was before my time, and I am going to date myself, 31 years old as I sit here today, before my time, in the height of the Bills being assembled as a team, as a quote-unquote dynasty. You don't have to win a Super Bowl to be a dynasty. There's plenty of teams that have been a dynasty of their conference that came up short, whether it's in football, baseball. You're a great team. You're a great team. And just as the Bills were trying to put that team together that had Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, Bruce Smith, Darryl Talley, all these guys, right, that most of them are Hall of Famers now. Darryl Talley, throw my vote out there for him, no problem. Steve Tasker, same thing, right? Kent Hall, same thing. Throwing those votes out there left and right for those three. There was a moment where Jim Kelly was not protected in the pocket as well as he thought he should be. And he called out House Ballard in a scrum and said that my offensive linemen need to block better for me. And it was a game in which Jim Kelly threw an interception. And the first guy to call out Jim Kelly essentially, the next guy in the row of scrums that the media provided in the Bills locker room to the local media was Thurman Thomas. He's standing right there. He sees the media talking to Jim Kelly. He hears what Jim Kelly had to say, and he took it upon himself to then react to it and say something to the tune of, well, the media is asking us, we just talked to Jim. We heard his thoughts on the offensive line. What are your thoughts, Thurman? Thurman says, well, the offensive line didn't block well today, but the quarterback didn't play well. The quarterback threw 2 interceptions today, threw 2 balls to the wrong team. Putting Jim Kelly on notice, you call out one of us, you're calling out all of us, essentially. We're going to kick it right back to you because you didn't play your best either, Jim. And that created the moment where Bill Polian said, wait a minute, we have to call a meeting here between these 2 players because this marching band won't work in unison. Essentially, this team will not go to the beat of their own drum that they need to without these 2 guys. This is the starting franchise quarterback, the starting franchise running back. We got to get this together and make this work again. Put your differences aside. Stop calling each other out. Start being there for one another as teammates. Understand that this team can only go as far as its talent. It's got to take unison mindset to work together, lockstep, one foot after another. And potentially, if people are out there and are concerned and feel like their concerns are justified, then they do need to go out there, they meaning Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, and say, listen, guys, we've been knocking on the door of a Super Bowl berth for this franchise and for a fan base that is largely considered among the rest of the National Football League, which means the country that obviously watches this sport more than any other, believes that this is the best fan base that this sport has to offer. College, pro, you name it. That is nationally recognized now and affirmed by a lot of different entities now more than ever. Pack it in. Shut up. Put your egos aside and play the effing game. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. If this is not done, this team will fail. You're setting your team up for failure if you're not in the same mindset of doing what is best for the team. And if that needed to be done years ago and it wasn't done, then that falls solely on the shoulders of Sean McDermott. This story is not about Stefon Diggs. It is about Sean McDermott only. Case closed. If, in fact, this is a story, the story in the future is not about Stefon Diggs. People can point the finger at the player for only so long before you say to yourself, a team with this much talent is not accomplishing what it needs to accomplish, and one of the best players on the team has had enough? Why wouldn't he have enough? Why wouldn't he get to a point when, if he feels like his voice is not being heard, what's the first thing a child does? And I'm not saying Stefon Diggs is a child, but a child, if they're not heard, they scream. As a man, when they're not heard, they set some sort of example. They let it be known. And maybe Stefon Diggs is letting it be known that he's not being heard. And if that's the case, I get it. Because this is not the first time Stefon Diggs has been frustrated. If, in fact, this is why he's frustrated. This is all speculation. We've been told that he's been frustrated as a Bill for the reasons of losing in the playoffs. He's sick and tired of it. He wants to move forward, he wants to figure out why this is happening. We've also been told as recently as today that the reason he was frustrated had nothing to do with football. It had to do with something else. What was that something else? We'll never know unless someone comes clean, if in fact they need to. The one thing I want Bills Mafia to know more than anything is that if we continue to just let this story drag out, it will become a distraction to the fans from the mission at hand, winning the Super Bowl. Everybody knows that that's the goal. Everybody knows that that's the mission. The only way we can get there is by focusing on the game, the team, positive praise to the team, analyzing the team positively, negatively, supporting the team as much as we can without being biased, without being a biased fan, with no bias involved. And I love to look at this team subjectively, objectively. I've praised Sean McDermott for what he's done, but there is more than enough reason to criticize him at this point. It is put up, make or break to me. Putting everybody on notice, Bills Mafia. To me, for what it's worth, this year has got to be it. If this year is not it, there is reason to shake things up. There is reason to move forward with somebody else. If, in fact, they go into the playoffs and they go one and done or win one and then lose another one with this team, there's got to be a switch flipped at some point. And then you go year after year after year and that switch is not flipped and the lights are still off, something's wrong. Something is seriously wrong. And I hope that this is the year that McDermott shows, maybe by running the defense a little bit more aggressively, maybe showing a little bit more passion on the sideline, getting a little bit more heated. We start to see the level rise in terms of the expectations, the grit, the tenacity, ferocity. That's what I want to see. I want to know what's on the line to my team as a fan, and I want to know what's on the line to my team as a fan is just as much on the line to those guys wearing the headsets. I have not seen the urgency these last 2 years, especially in that game that ended the season against Cincinnati. But to my point, move on from that. Know that, move on from that, move forward. And that's it. Great show tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A lot to discuss in terms of our Buffalo Bills. And I know a lot of people are feeling a little frustrated at Stefon Diggs. I want to tell you guys, you shouldn't without knowing the full story. And the only way that we'll know the full story is in time, potentially, rather than jumping to conclusions and rushing to judgment. But Sean McDermott, 2023-2024, it's time to get it done.